Semiotics is the study of meaning-making, the philosophical theory of signs and symbols. This includes the study of signs and sign processes, indication, designation, likeness, analogy, metaphor, symbolism, signification, and communication. Semiotics is closely related to the field of linguistics, which, for its part, studies the structure and meaning of language more specifically. As different from linguistics, however, semiotics also studies non-linguistic sign systems. Semiotics often is divided into three branches: semantics, relation between signs and the things to which they refer; their denotata, or meaning; syntactics, relations among signs in formal structures; pragmatics, relation between signs and sign-using agents. Semiotics frequently is seen as having important anthropological dimensions. For example, Umberto Eco proposes that every cultural phenomenon may be studied as communication. Some semioticians focus on the logical dimensions of the science, however. They examine areas belonging also to the life sciences such as how organisms make predictions about, and adapt to, their semiotic niche in the world. In general, semiotic theories take signs or sign systems as their object of study. The communication of information in living organisms is covered in biosemiotics. Syntactics is the branch of semiotics that deals with the formal properties of signs and symbols. More precisely, syntactics deals with the rules that govern how words are combined to form phrases and sentences. Charles Morris adds that semantics deals with the relation of signs to their designator and the objects that they may or do denote. And pragmatics deals with the biotic aspects of semiosis, that is, with all the psychological, biological, and sociological phenomena that occur in the functioning of signs. Terminology: the term, which was spelled semiotics, derives from the Greek I florin I 1/4 I micron I to the first I permili I to the first I zamia tychos, observant of signs, and it was first used in English by Henry Stubbies in a very precise sense to denote the branch of medical science relating to the interpretation of signs. John Locke used the term semiotic in Book 4, Chapter 21 of an essay concerning human understanding. Here he explains how science may be divided into three parts. All that can fall within the compass of human understanding, being either, first, the nature of things, as they are in themselves, their relations, and their manner of operation, or, secondly, that which man himself ought to do, as a rational and voluntary agent, for the attainment of any end, especially happiness, or, thirdly, the ways and means whereby the knowledge of both the one and the other of these is attained and communicated. I think science may be divided properly into these three sorts. Locke then elaborates on the nature of this third category, naming it in I 1/4 I micron I to the first I permili I to the first I registered trademark, and explaining it as the doctrine of signs in the following terms. Nor is there anything to be relied upon in physic, but an exact knowledge of medicinal physiology, semiotics, method of curing, and tried medicines. In the 19th century, Charles Sanders Park defined what he termed semiotic as the quasi-necessary, or formal doctrine of signs, which abstracts what must be the characters of all signs used by an intelligence capable of learning by experience, and which is philosophical logic pursued in terms of signs and sign processes. The Park scholar and editor Max H. Fish claimed in 1978 that semiotic was Park's own preferred rendering of Locke's I florin I 1/4 I to the first I permili I to the first I registered trademark. Charles Morris followed Park in using the term semiotic, and in extending the discipline beyond human communication to animal learning and use of signals. Ferdinand de Saussure, however, founded his semiotics, which he called semiology, in the social sciences. It is possible to conceive of a science which studies the role of signs as part of social life. It would form part of social psychology, and hence of general psychology. We shall call it semiology. It would investigate the nature of signs and the laws governing them. Since it does not yet exist, one cannot say for certain that it will exist. But has a right to exist, a place ready for it in advance. Linguistics is only one branch of this general science. the laws which semiology will discover will be laws applicable in linguistics, and linguistics will thus be assigned to a clearly defined place in the field of human knowledge. Prussian semiotic is triadic, and is conceived of as philosophical logic studied in terms of signs that are not always linguistic or artificial, and sign processes, modes of inference, and the inquiry process in general, with emphases not only on symbols, but also on signs that are semblances and signs that are signs by being factually connected to their objects. Yuri Lotman introduced Eastern Europe to semiotics and adopted Locke Euro unregistered trademark S coinage as the name to subtitle his founding at the University of Tartu in Estonia in 1964 of the first semiotics journal, Sign Systems Studies. TACBOC assimilated semiology to semiotics as a part to a whole, and was involved in choosing the name Semiotica for the first international journal devoted to the study of signs. History. The importance of signs and signification has been recognized throughout much of the history of philosophy, and in psychology as well. Plato and Aristotle both explored the relationship between signs and the world, and Augustine considered the nature of the sign within a conventional system. These theories have had a lasting effect in Western philosophy, especially through scholastic philosophy. The general study of signs that began in Latin with Augustine culminated in Latin with the 1632 Tractatus de Signis of John Poinsett, and then began anew in late modernity with the attempt in 1867 by Charles Sanders Park to draw up a new list of categories a. Park aimed to base his new list directly upon experience precisely as constituted by action of signs, in contrast with the list of Aristotle unregistered trademark S categories which aim to articulate within experience the dimension of being that is independent of experience and knowable as such, through human understanding. The estimative powers of animals interpret the environment as sense to form a meaningful world of objects, but the objects of this world consist exclusively of objects related to the animal as desirable, undesirable, or safe to ignore a. In contrast to this, human understanding adds to the animal relation of self-identity within objects which transforms objects experienced into things as well as zero objects. Thus the generically animal objective world as becomes a species-specifically human objective world or Lebenswelt, wherein linguistic communication, rooted in the biologically underdetermined Enelt of human animals, makes possible the further dimension of cultural organization within the otherwise merely social organization of animals whose powers of observation may deal only with directly sensible instances of objectivity. This further point, that human culture depends upon language understood first of all not as communication, but as the biologically underdetermined aspect or feature of the human animal unregistered trademark S in Enelt, was originally clearly identified by Thomas A. Seebach. Seebach also played the central role in bringing Prussian unregistered trademark S work to the center of the semiotic stage in the 20th century, first with his expansion of the human use of signs to include also the generically animal sign usage, then with his further expansion of semiosis to include the vegetative world. Prussian unregistered trademark S distinction of an interpretant from an interpreter, with the further qualification that the former need not be a or even mental mode of buying a not his demonstration that sign relations are perforce irreducibly triadic, as is commonly assumed in his following so far as the followers continue the modern tradition of ignoring the Latin age of philosopher or unregistered trademark S Historia was his most revolutionary move and most seminal contribution to the doctrine of signs. Prussian unregistered trademark S interpretant notion opened the way to understanding and action of signs beyond the realm of animal life, which was his first advance beyond Latin age semiotics. Other early theorists in the field of semiotics include Charles W. Morris. Max Black argued that the work of Bertrand Russell was seminal in the field. Formulations. Semioticians classify signs or sign systems in relation to the way they are transmitted. This process of carrying meaning depends on the use of codes that may be the individual sounds or letters that humans use to form words, the body movements they make to show attitude or emotion, or even something as general as the clothes they wear. To coin a word to refer to a thing, the community must agree on a simple meaning within their language, but that word can transmit the meaning only within the language's grammatical structures and codes. Codes also represent the values of the culture, and are able to add new shades of connotation to every aspect of life. To explain the relationship between semiotics and communication studies, communication is defined as the process of transferring data and/or meaning from a source to a receiver. Hence, communication theorists construct models based on codes, media, and contexts to explain the biology, psychology, and mechanics involved. Both disciplines also recognize that the technical process cannot be separated from the fact that the receiver must decode the data, that is, be able to distinguish the data as salient, and make meaning out of it. This implies that there is a necessary overlap between semiotics and communication. Indeed, many of the concepts are shared, although in each field the emphasis is different. In Messages and Meanings, an introduction to semiotics, Marcel Dancy suggested that semioticians' priorities were to study signification first, and communication second. A more extreme view is offered by Jean-Jacques Nattiers, who, as a musicologist, considered the theoretical study of communication irrelevant to his application of semiotics. Semiotics differs from linguistics in that it generalizes the definition of a sign to encompass signs in any medium or sensory modality. Thus it broadens the range of sign systems and sign relations, and extends the definition of language in what amounts to its widest analogical or metaphorical sense. Park's definition of the term semiotic as the study of necessary features of signs also has the effect of distinguishing the discipline from linguistics as the study of contingent features that the world's languages happen to have acquired in the course of their evolutions. From a subjective standpoint, perhaps more difficult is the distinction between semiotics and the philosophy of language. In a sense, the difference lies between separate traditions rather than subjects. Different authors have called themselves philosopher of language, or semiotician. This difference does not match the separation between analytic and continental philosophy. On a closer look, there may be found some differences regarding subjects. Philosophy of language pays more attention to natural languages or to languages in general, while semiotics is deeply concerned with non-linguistic signification. Philosophy of language also bears connections to linguistics, while semiotics might appear closer to some of the humanities and to cultural anthropology. Semiosis or semiosis is the process that forms meaning from any organism's apprehension of the world through signs. Scholars who have talked about semiosis and their sub-theories of semiotics include C.S. Park, John Deely, and Umberto Eco. Cognitive semiotics is combining methods and theories developed in the disciplines of cognitive methods and theories developed in semiotics and the humanities, with providing new information into human signification and its manifestation in cultural practices. The research on cognitive semiotics brings together semiotics from linguistics, cognitive science, and related disciplines on a common meta-theoretical platform of concepts, methods, and shared data. Cognitive semiotics may also be seen as the study of meaning-making by employing and integrating methods and theories developed in the cognitive sciences. This involves conceptual and textual analysis as well as experimental investigations. Cognitive semiotics initially was developed at the Center for Semiotics at Aarhus University, with an important connection with the Center of Functionally Integrated Neuroscience at Aarhus Hospital. Amongst the prominent cognitive semioticians are Paraj Brandt, Sven Destegard, Pierre Bunjel-Nrd, Frederick Strahrenfeld, Mikkel Valentin, Christian Tyler Copyright N, Ricardo Fusaroli, and Jordan Zlatov. Zlatov later in cooperation with Gar Paragraph Ransonesen established CCS at Lund University, Sweden. Some important semioticians, Charles Sanders Park, a noted logician who founded citation-needed philosophical pragmatism, defined semiosis as an irreducibly triadic process wherein something, as an object, logically determines or influences something as a sign to determine or influence something as an interpretation or interpretant, itself a sign, thus leading to further interpretants. Semiosis is logically structured to perpetuate itself. The object may be quality, fact, rule, or even fictional, and may be immediate to the sign, the object as represented in the sign, or dynamic, the object as it really is, on which the immediate object is founded. The interpretant may be immediate to the sign, or that the sign immediately expresses, such as a word's usual meaning. Or dynamic, such as a state of agitation. Or final or normal, the ultimate ramifications of the sign about its object, to which inquiry taken far enough would be destined and with which any interpretant, at most, may coincide. His semiotic covered not only artificial, linguistic, and symbolic signs, but also semblances such as kindred sensible qualities, and indices such as reactions. He came ca. 1903 to classify any sign by 3 interdependent trichotomies, intersecting to form 10 classes of sign. Signs also enter into various kinds of meaningful combinations. Park covered both semantic and syntactical issues in his speculative grammar. He regarded formal semiotic as logic per se and part of philosophy, as also encompassing study of arguments and inquiry's methods including pragmatism, and as allied to, but distinct from logic's pure mathematics. In addition to pragmatism, Park provided a definition of the term a sign as a sign, or representamen, is something which stands to somebody for something in some respect or capacity. It addresses somebody, that is, creates in the mind of that person an equivalent sign. That sign which it creates I call the interpretant of the first sign. The sign stands for something, its object not in all respects, but in reference to a sort of idea. Park called the sign a representamen, in order to bring out the fact that a sign is something that or represents something else in order to suggest it in some way. For a summary of Park's contributions to semiotics, see Lyska or Atkin. Ferdinand de Saussure, the father of modern linguistics, proposed a dualistic notion of signs, relating the signifier as the form of the word or phrase uttered, to the signified as the mental concept. It is important to note that, according to Saussure, the sign is completely arbitrary that is, there was no necessary connection between the sign and its meaning. This sets him apart from previous philosophers, such as Plato or the scholastics, who thought that there must be some connection between a signifier and the object it signifies. In his course in general linguistics, Saussure credits the American linguist William Dwight Whitney with insisting on the arbitrary nature of the sign. Saussure's insistence on the arbitrariness of the sign also has influenced later philosophers and theorists such as Jacques Derrida, Roland Barthes, and Jean Baudrillard. Ferdinand de Saussure coined the term czar copyright meology while teaching his landmark course on general linguistics at the University of Geneva from 1906 to 1911. Saussure posited that no word is inherently meaningful. Rather, a word is only a signifier, that is, the representation of something, and it must be combined in the brain with the signified, or the thing itself, in order to form a meaning-imbued sign. Saussure believed that dismantling signs was a real science, for in doing so we come to an empirical understanding of how humans synthesize physical stimuli into words and other abstract concepts. Jacob von Uexka 1/4 studied the sign processes in animals. He used the German word for environment, Umwelt, to describe the individual's subjective world, and he invented the concept of functional circle as a general model of sign processes. In his theory of meaning, he described the semiotic approach to biology, thus establishing the field that now is called biosemiotics. Valentin Villeneuve was a Soviet-Russian linguist, whose work has been influential in the field of literary theory and Marxist theory of ideology. Written in the late 1920s in the USSR, Villeneuve's Marxism and the philosophy of language developed to counter Saussurean linguistics, which situated language use in social process rather than in an entirely decontextualized Saussurean langue. Louis Jomslov developed a formalist approach to Saussure's structuralist theories. His best-known work is Prolegomena to a Theory of Language, which was expanded in Ra copyright Summa copyright of the Theory of Language, a formal development of glossomatics, his scientific calculus of language. Charles W. Morris. In his 1938 Foundations of the Theory of Signs, he defined semiotics as grouping the triad syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. Syntax studies the interrelation of the signs, without regard to meaning. Semantics studies the relation between the signs and the objects to which they apply. Pragmatics studies the relation between the sign system and its human user. Unlike his mentor George Herbert Mead, Morris was a behaviorist and sympathetic to the Vienna Circle positivism of his colleague, Rudolf Carnap. Morris was accused by John Dewey of misreading Park. Thor von Uexka1/4 the father of modern psychosomatic medicine, developed a diagnostic method based on semiotic and biosemiotic analyses. Roland Barthes was a French literary theorist and semiotician. He often would critique pieces of cultural material to expose how bourgeois society used them to impose its values upon others. For instance, the portrayal of wine drinking in French society as a robust and healthy habit would be a bourgeois ideal perception contradicted by certain realities. He found semiotics useful in conducting these critiques. Barthes explained that these bourgeois cultural myths were second-order signs, or connotations. A picture of a full, dark bottle is a sign, a signifier relating to a signified, a fermented, alcoholic beverage wine. However, the bourgeois take this signified and apply their own emphasis to it, making wine a new signifier, this time relating to a new signified, the idea of healthy, robust, relaxing wine. Motivations for such manipulations vary from a desire to sell products to a simple desire to maintain the status quo. These insights brought Barthes very much in line with similar Marxist theory. Algirdas Julian Grimers developed a structural version of semiotics named Generative Semiotics, trying to shift the focus of discipline from signs to systems of signification. His theories developed the ideas of Saussure, James Claude La Copyright by Strauss, and Maurice Merleau-Ponty. Thomas A. Seebock, a student of Charles W. Morris, was a prolific and wide-ranging American semiotician. Although he insisted that animals are not capable of language, he expanded the purview of semiotics to include non-human signaling and communication systems, thus raising some of the issues addressed by philosophy of mind and coining the term zoosemiotics. Seebock insisted that all communication was made possible by the relationship between an organism and the environment in which it lives. He also posed the equation between semiosis and life via a view that the Copenhagen Tartu biosemiotics school has further developed. Yuri Lotman was the founding member of the Tartu semiotic school. He developed a semiotic approach to the study of Kaituria semiotics of Kaituria and established a communication model for the study of text semiotics. He also introduced the concept of the semiosphere. Among his Moscow colleagues were Vladimir Toporov, Vyacheslav Savolodovich Ivanov, and Boris Uspensky. Umberto Eco made a wider audience aware of semiotics by various publications, most notably A Theory of Semiotics and his novel, The Name of the Rose, which includes applied semiotic operations. His most important contributions to the field bear on interpretation, encyclopedia, and model reader. He also has criticized in several works the iconism, or iconic signs, to which he purposes four modes of sign production: recognition, ostension, replica, and invention. Eliseo Veracube then developed his social discourse theory inspired in the Prussian conception of semiosis. The Mu group developed a structural version of rhetorics, and the visual semiotics. Current applications of semiotics include: it represents a methodology for the analysis of texts regardless of the medium in which it is presented. For these purposes, text is any message preserved in a form whose existence is independent of both sender and receiver. It may improve ergonomic design in situations where it is important to ensure that human beings are able to interact more effectively with their environments, whether it be on a large scale, as in architecture, or on a small scale, such as the configuration of instrumentation for human use. In some countries, its role is limited to literary criticism and an appreciation of audio and visual media, but this narrow focus may inhibit a more general study of the social and political forces shaping how different media are used and their dynamic status within modern culture. Issues of technological determinism in the choice of media and the design of communication strategies assume new importance in this age of mass media. the use of semiotic methods to reveal apparently different levels of meaning and, sometimes, hidden motivations has led Harold Bloom, of Yale University, to label elements of the subject as Marxist nihilist. Publication of research is both in dedicated journals such as Science Systems Studies, established by Uri Lotman and published by Tartu University Press. Semiotica, founded by Thomas A. Seebach and published by Mouton de Guita. Zeitschrift für Unkulture Semiotik. European Journal of Semiotics. Versus, al. The American Journal of Semiotics. And as articles accepted in periodicals of other disciplines, especially journals oriented toward philosophy and cultural criticism. The major semiotic book series Semiotics, Communication, Cognition, published by de Guita Mouton replaces the former approaches to semiotics, and approaches to applied semiotics. Since 1980 the Semiotic Society of America has produced an annual conference series, Semiotics, the Proceedings of the Semiotic Society of America. Branches. Semiotics has sprouted a number of subfields, including, but not limited to, the following: biosemiotics, the study of semiotic processes at all levels of biology, or a semiotic study of living systems. Semiotic anthropology, cognitive semiotics, the study of meaning-making by employing and integrating methods and theories developed in the cognitive sciences. This involves conceptual and textual analysis as well as experimental investigations. Cognitive semiotics initially was developed at the Center for Semiotics at Aarhus University, with an important connection with the Center of Functionally Integrated Neuroscience at Aarhus Hospital. Amongst the prominent cognitive semioticians are Paraj Brandt, Sven Destegard, Pierre Bunjel NRD, Frederick Strunfelt, Mikkel Valentin, Christian Tyler Copyright N, Ricardo Fusaroli, and Jordan Zlatov. Zlatov later in cooperation with Gar Paragraph Ransonessen established the Center for Cognitive Semiotics at Lund University, Sweden. Computational semiotics attempts to engineer the process of semiosis, say in the study of and design for human-computer interaction or to mimic aspects of human cognition through artificial intelligence and knowledge representation. Cultural and literary semiotics examines the literary world, the visual media, the mass media, and advertising in the work of writers such as Roland Barthes, Marcel Dainsey, and Uri Lotman. Cybersemiotics built on two already generated interdisciplinary approaches, cybernetics and systems theory including information theory and science, and Pushkian semiotics including phenomenology and pragmatic aspects of linguistics, attempts to make the two interdisciplinary paradigms both going beyond mechanistic and pure constructivistic ideas complement each other in a common framework. Zahran Breyer. Design semiotics or product semiotics the study of the use of signs in the design of physical products. Introduced by Martin Krampen, AO, and in a practitioner-oriented version by Rune Mona Paragraph while teaching industrial design at the Institute of Design, Umeå University, Sweden. Film semiotics the study of the various codes and signs of film and how they are understood. See Christian Metz. Gregorian chant semiology is a current avenue of paleographical research in Gregorian chant which is revising the Solsmith school of interpretation. Law and Semiotics one of the more accomplished publications in this field is the International Journal for the Semiotics of Law, published by International Association for the Semiotics of Law. Music semiology there are strong arguments that music inhabits a semiological realm which, on both ontogenetic and phylogenetic levels, has developmental priority over verbal language. See Natias, Stefani, Baroni, and Semiotica. Semiotics of music videos. Organizational semiotics the study of semiotic processes in organizations. Social semiotics expands the interpretable semiotic landscape to include all cultural codes, such as in slang, fashion, and advertising, structuralism and post-structuralism in the work of Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault, Louis Jomslev, Roman Jacobson, Jacques Lacan, Claude La Copyright by Strauss, Roland Barthes, etc. Theatre semiotics Euro extends or adapts semiotics on stage. Key theoreticians include Keir Elam, urban semiotics, visual semiotics Euro analyzes visual signs. Prominent modern founders to this branch are Gruber Micron and Gar Paragraph Ransonessen, semiotics of photography, pictorial semiotics. Pictorial semiotics is intimately connected to art history and theory. It has gone beyond them both in at least one fundamental way, however. While art history has limited its visual analysis to a small number of pictures that qualify as works of art, pictorial semiotics has focused on the properties of pictures more generally. This break from traditional art history and theory Euro as well as from other major streams of semiotic analysis Euro leaves open a wide variety of possibilities for pictorial semiotics. Some influences have been drawn from phenomenological analysis, cognitive psychology, structuralist and cognitivist linguistics, and visual anthropology and sociology. Semiotics of food. Food has been one traditional topic of choice in relating semiotic theory because it is extremely accessible and easily relatable to the average individual Euro unregistered trademark life. Food is said to be semiotic because it transforms meaning with preparation. Food that is eaten by a wild animal raw from a carcass is obviously different in meaning when compared to a food that is prepared by humans in a kitchen to represent a cultural dish. Food also may be said to be symbolic of certain social codes. If food is treated as a code, the messages it encodes will be found in the pattern of social relations being expressed. The message is about different degrees of hierarchy, inclusion and exclusion, boundaries and transactions across boundaries Food is a semiotic regardless of how it is prepared. Whether food is prepared with precision in a fine dining restaurant, picked from a dumpster, plucked, devoured, or even consumed by a wild animal, meaning always may be extracted from the way a certain food has been prepared and the context in which it is served. Semiotics and globalization. Studies have shown that semiotics may make or break a brand. Culture codes strongly influence whether a population likes or dislikes a brand unregistered trademark marketing, especially internationally. If the company is unaware of the criteria unregistered trademark codes, it runs the risk of failing in its marketing. Globalization has caused the development of a global consumer culture where products have similar associations, whether positive or negative, across numerous markets. Mistranslations may lead to instances of English or Chinglish, terms for unintentionally humorous cross-cultural slogans intended to be understood in English. This may be caused by a sign that, in Park's terms, mistakenly indexes or symbolizes something in one culture, that it does not in another. In other words, it creates a connotation that is culturally bound, and that violates some culture code. Theorists who have studied humor such as Schopenhauer suggest that contradiction or incongruity creates absurdity and therefore, humor. Violating a culture code creates this construct of ridiculousness for the culture that owns the code. Intentional humor also may fail cross-culturally because jokes are not on code for the receiving culture. A good example of branding according to cultural code is Disney unregistered trademark's international theme park business. For example, Disney fits well with Japan's cultural code because the Japanese value ekuteness politeness, and gift-giving as part of their culture code. Tokyo Disneyland sells the most souvenirs of any Disney theme park. In contrast, Disneyland Paris failed when it launched as Euro Disney because the company did not research the code's underlying European culture. Its storybook retelling of European folktales was taken as elitist and insulting, and the strict appearance standards that it had for employees resulted in discrimination lawsuits in France. Disney souvenirs were perceived as cheap trinkets. The park was a financial failure because its code violated the expectations of European culture in ways that were offensive. On the other hand, some researchers have suggested that it is possible to successfully pass a sign perceived as a cultural icon, such as the Coca-Cola or McDonald's logos, from one culture to another. This may be accomplished if the sign is migrated from a more economically developed to a less developed culture. The intentional association of a product with another culture is called foreign consumer culture positioning. Products also may be marketed using global trends or culture codes, for example, saving time in a busy world. But even these may be fine-tuned for specific cultures. Research also found that, as airline industry brandings grow and become more international, their logos become more symbolic and less iconic. The iconicity and symbolism of a sign depends on the cultural convention and are on that ground in relation with each other. If the cultural convention has greater influence on the signs get more symbolic value. Main institutions: A World Organization of Semiotics Euro, the International Association for Semiotic Studies, with its journal Semiotica Euro, was established in 1969. The larger research centers together with extensive teaching program include the semiotics departments at the University of Tartu, Aarhus University, and Bologna University. See also, Outline of Semiotics, Index of Semiotics articles, Semiotic elements and classes of signs, references, notes. Bibliography. External links, further reading, journals, books. Errors are Euro Associations, Centers, American Journal of Semiotics, Joseph Brent, editor, and John Dealey, managing editor. A Euro from the Semiotic Society of America. Applied Semiotics/ZAR. Copyright Myotique Applica. Copyright E. Peter G. Martinson and Pascal G. Michlucci, editors. Approaches to Semiotics, Thomas A. Seebach, Alan Ray, Roland Posner, al., editors. Approaches to Applied Semiotics, Thomas Seebach al., editors. Biosemiotics, Marcello Barbieri, Editor-in-Chief. A Euro from the International Society for Biosemiotic Studies. Center for Semiotics, Aarhus University, Denmark. Cognitive Semiotics, Paraj Brandt and Todd Oakley, Editors-in-Chief. Cybernetics and Human Knowing, Zar Renbreyer, Chief Editor. International Journal of Signs and Semiotic Systems, Angelo Lula and Joe Pound Oqueiroz, editors. Open Semiotics Resource Center. Journals, lecture courses, etc. SEED Journal, Edwina Tabaski, editor. A Euro from SEE. Semiotica, Marcel Dainsey, Chief Editor. A Euro from the International Association for Semiotic Studies. Semiotic, Gianpaolo Capretini, Managing Director. Andrea Vall and Miriam Vasali, editors. Some articles in English. Home site seems gone from web, Oldal, 3, no longer good, and Wayback Machine cannot retrieve. Semiotics, Communication and Cognition, Paul Copley and Kalevi Kull, editors. Semiotics New Series, A Global Information Bulletin, Paul Buasok al. Sign Systems Studies, Kalevi Kull, Kati Lindstrom, Michael Lotman, Timo Moran, Sylvie Salibert, Peter Torup, editors. A Euro from the Department of Semiotics, U of Tartu, Estonia. Signs, International Journal of Semiotics. Martin Thelefsen, Torkild Thelefsen, and Bent Zar-Rensen, Chief Eds. Tartu Semiotics Library, Peter Torup, Kalevi Kull, Sylvie Salibert, editors. The Public Journal of Semiotics, Paul Buasok, Editor-in-Chief. Alan Cienki, Associate Editor. Rena Copyright Journal, Winfried Mel Paragraph Th. The Semiotic Review of Books, Gary Gnosko, General Editor. Paul Buasok, Founding Editor. Transactions of the Charles S. Park Society, Cornelis de Waal, Chief Editor. A Euro from the Charles S. Park Society. Versus, Quidini di Studi Semiotici, founded by Umberto Eco.